So today I'm going to review something that just about any music lover can afford. That's right, I'm talking about a good old-fashioned stereo receiver. Let's go. Alright, so here it is, the Yamaha R-S202. And when you get right down to it, this is a basic stereo receiver. It's not meant for home theater applications, and instead it's geared strictly towards music listening. And what you're getting is a very minimalist design, both in terms of appearance as well as features. In fact, this receiver only has two features that are built inside, one being an AM/FM tuner and the other being a Bluetooth receiver, which yes, is compatible with Apple devices. So now let's go ahead and talk about power output. Yamaha proudly claims that this receiver can output up to 140 watts per channel into 8 ohms, which would be amazing if that was actually true. So just like almost every other receiver company, this power specification is grossly overinflated. Instead, what you can really expect from this receiver is closer to 50 watts per channel into 8 ohms of clean, usable power output. And to be fair, that's more than enough for most people. Now, if you're confused about the whole power thing, then keep watching this video and I'll explain what's going on in just a bit. But for now, let's move on and talk about build quality. So overall, it's decent. It's not going to win any awards, that's for sure, but it's directly in line with other receivers in its price class. Speaking of price, it retails for $169. So now what we're going to do is go over a couple key features and then we're going to talk about how it sounds. Now on the front of the unit, as you can tell, it's pretty basic. Volume control, we have buttons for tone controls, input. We also have a remote control in case you don't want to get up and actually change anything. The only two features I really want to focus on here is going to be the jack for the headphones, which actually sounds surprisingly good. More on that later. And then we have a speaker A/B selector switch. So yes, you can power up to 4 speakers at once with this receiver. However, I would only recommend doing so if you plan on using this receiver for like a business, or maybe you have some in-ceiling speakers with an impedance of 8 ohms or higher and you just need something for, say, background music. Fine, go ahead and do that. But if you're buying this unit for sound quality, then you're going to be better off running just a single set of speakers. So now let's go ahead and turn this unit around so we can quickly look at the back. It's lightweight, so I don't actually have to pause anything. I can just hold the camera and do this. Okay, so here's the back, and it's pretty simple. We have a captive power cord. This is going to be our spot for the AM/FM tuner, a bunch of analog inputs. Now, I thought this was going to be an output for a subwoofer, but I was wrong. This is actually more for a CD recorder, which is pretty disappointing, to be honest with you. And speaking of disappointment, let's talk about these spring clips for your speaker cables. Look, when this receiver was priced at around $120, $130, I didn't complain. Because, come on, you get what you pay for. But now that it's creeping closer and closer to the $200 price point, I think the next generation of whatever this product's going to be will have to feature 5-way binding posts. I mean, there's just no excuse for that anymore. Anyway, that is going to be it for the overview of the 202. It's a pretty basic receiver, so now it's time to talk about what it brings to the table in terms of performance. Let's go. Okay, so before we go deep into this review, first, let's talk about the type of speakers that pair up well to this receiver. Now, the rule of thumb here is very simple. You want to use speakers that are easy to drive or have a nominal impedance rating of 6 ohms or higher. Let me give you some examples. You have the Polk Audio Signature series, or even their Monitor and T-line, Klipsch with the Reference and Reference Premier, Kef with the Q series, Triangle with the Berea line. You get the idea. Now, the question is, what kind of speakers should you avoid? Well, pretty much anything that has an impedance rating of 4 ohms or lower. Because while this receiver can technically drive those speakers, you won't be able to listen to them at very loud volumes. And that's because those speakers are more difficult to drive and they require a higher quality power supply than what you will find inside of a receiver like the 202. There are also some affordable speakers that may not pair up well to the 202, such as the ELAC Unify line as well as the Polk Audio Reserve, because those speakers require just a bit more power and control than what the 202 can deliver. However, for most speakers under $1,000 that have an impedance of 6 ohms or higher, you should be good to go with the 202. And that leads me to how it performs. Alright, so here's the game plan. First, I'm going to summarize who I think this receiver is for, and then I'm going to dive into those nerdy audiophile details. So, in my opinion, this receiver is for two types of individuals. The first is somebody who's looking to assemble their first stereo system, and you know you want sound quality that's way better than any soundbar or wireless Bluetooth system. And then the second individual is somebody who already owns an audiophile stereo rig, but now you want something for a different room, and neither one of you want to break the bank. And when it comes to sound quality, this is for somebody who wants a laid-back listening experience. It's for people who value smooth treble, a full and warm-sounding mid-range with strong bass output. If you're somebody who's very sensitive to peaky or bright treble, this is an absolute must-buy in its class. However, it's not going to be for everybody. If you're all about detail or you like a forward sound and you're all about tight and controlled bass, then there are other options worth looking at, even at this price range. Anyway, that is the general overview, so now it's time to dive into those nerdy details. So when you get right down to it, the 202 is a product that has a very distinct sonic character, one that I would describe as being warm and laid back. So to explain what I mean, let's dive into those nerdy details, starting with the treble. So the treble, as I mentioned earlier, has more of a smooth character to it, which is really surprising because I remember back when Yamaha's entry-level components were completely different. They had more of an aggressive and in-your-face sound. But you don't get that with the 202. Instead, it goes in the opposite direction by offering you more of a laid-back listening experience. And while I don't feel like this compromises the ability to enjoy a good amount of detail, I could see some listeners preferring more of a lively presentation. Now, the counter-argument to that, of course, is that's what tone controls are for. But look, the bottom line is this. Unless you listen at high volumes or you're listening to recordings with a lot of treble through speakers with a lot of treble, what you can expect from this receiver is a fatigue-free listening experience. Now let's talk about the mid-range. Now, in my opinion, this is the star of the show for the 202. It has fantastic mid-range. In fact, in many respects, it reminds me of a really good British amplifier because what you get is something that's full and warm sounding with good tone. For example, when you listen to, say, a piano or electric guitars, there's actually weight and scale and body to the sound that you wouldn't expect for something in this price range. Yet it doesn't go so far as to make male or female vocals sound overly chesty. It's this really fine balance that they struck. And I'll just say this, if you're a musician and you're looking for something in this range, then you need to check out the 202. Next, let's talk about the bass. So the bass takes on this full, warm, and strong character. No, it's not going to be the last word in note definition or speed, but it does deliver a lot of fun, and there's a lot of strength to the bass. So if you listen to electronic music or hip-hop, I think you're going to be very satisfied with what you hear. It's not going to be for everybody, but I think most people are going to have fun with it. Next, let's talk about dynamic output. So dynamic output is going to be okay. Look, it's an entry-level stereo receiver. It's not bad. It's not amazing. When the recording calls for a lot of dynamic energy, you'll experience at least some of that through this receiver. But look, the bottom line is this. The 202 is meant to deliver a fatigue-free listening experience that focuses on fun. And I think Yamaha did a great job here, making it very easy to recommend to a lot of people. But still, it's not the only game in town, so let's go ahead and talk about how it compares to another great receiver in this class, the Sony 190. Okay, so here's the bottom line. Both the Sony 190 and the Yamaha 202 retail for around the same amount of money. On a bench, they output roughly the same amount of power. I mean, there's a difference there, but it's not big enough to be meaningful, and both have a reputation for offering up good sound for the money. And when you listen to them side by side, unsurprisingly, they have a different way of doing things, meaning that somebody is going to prefer one over the other. So if you're trying to decide between the two, hopefully this section will bring some much needed clarity. So let's go ahead and start off with the advantages of the Sony first, starting with the fact that it actually has a phono stage built in. So for some of you, that's already going to be an automatic win. But then when it comes to performance, the Sony's going to offer up a clearer, more balanced sounding presentation between the treble, the mid-range, and the bass. The bass is going to have better note definition, and it's going to be just a little bit quicker. The treble is going to be a tad more open and more lively. And the big advantage is going to be detail separation, which is when you listen to a recording, the Sony does a great job of giving every performer their own sense of space. It's actually freakishly good for something in its price range. And yet the Yamaha has its advantages. It's going to have a smoother sounding presentation, which means it's going to be more forgiving of poorly recorded material. The mid-range is going to take on a warmer, fuller sound, and the bass is going to come across as stronger, whereas the Sony's is going to be just a little bit cleaner. So it's just a matter of picking what it is that you prefer. Do you want the smoother, fuller sound of the Yamaha, or do you want the cleaner, more detailed sound of the Sony? There's no real right or wrong here. Anyway, that is it for this comparison. So you know what? Let's go ahead and go over some caveats, and then we're going to wrap this baby up. Okay, so I need to give this section some context, because when you get right down to it, I'm talking about a stereo receiver that costs less than $200 that many of us can buy at our local mass market retailer. So there's only so much to complain about here, but still, there are some things worth mentioning, starting with the most obvious. As I say in all of my reviews, this product has a distinct sound. It's not going to be for everybody. Moving on, I think we can all agree that those spring-style speaker connectors just need to go away, like forever. Number 3, I wish there was at least one more feature on this receiver, like a built-in DAC, or a built-in phono stage, or a subwoofer output. That'd be nice. Number 4, there's a minor amount of transformer hum, which you can only hear if the room is completely dead silent. It's very faint, but still something worth mentioning. And then lastly, I'm not really a big fan of any company that inflates the power output of their products. I know. Don't hate the player, hate the game, but I'll have a rant about that later on. Speaking of, we're pretty much at the end of this review, but you know what? Let me do something different. I want to talk about how this receiver sounds with headphones, or at least a headphone, because I thought it was pretty cool, and then I'll leave you with my final thoughts. So this is something that I've never done in a review before like this, which is to make a dedicated section about how a product sounds with headphones. And the reason why I'm doing this is because, well, the 808 sounds great with headphones, or at least it does with the SR60Es. And the reason why this is so important to me is because I reviewed a lot of receivers and integrated amps, specifically from $3,000 below, and just about every single one of them sucks when it comes to the headphone output, to even include products that have a dedicated headphone amplifier. Well, surprisingly enough, the 808 doesn't suck. In fact, its smooth and easygoing sound when coupled to the Grado's kind of bright sound makes for a great match, and it even doubles down on what the Grado's do so well, which is that nice, strong, warm-sounding mid-range and bass, making for a very fun listening experience. And I could see this going well with many other headphones in this class, like Sennheiser, Beyerdynamic. It could just be a whole lot of fun. Now, obviously, it's not going to be for reference-grade headphones, and there is just a little bit of hum that you can hear when you plug your headphones into the receiver, but as soon as you start playing music, even at low volumes, you're not going to notice it. So this is something that I thought was worth mentioning, but you know what? I think I've spent enough time talking about this product, so let's go ahead and wrap this up. Okay, so at this point, you should already know what you're getting into with this receiver and whether or not it's something that'll work for you. So having said that, I'm going to wrap up this video by telling you all what I really think about the 202. And really, this is pretty easy because I like this receiver, and I like it for 2 reasons. Number 1, it has the kind of voicing that I think is perfect for something in this price class. Because when you get right down to it, most of the speakers that people are going to use with this receiver are aggressively voiced. And then there's the cold hard reality that most of the music that we actually enjoy listening to is not recorded so well. And then to be really real, it's not like people buying this receiver are going to be connecting it to turntables and CD players that cost many thousands of dollars. Nah, you're probably going to be using your phone, your tablet, a Blu-ray player. Look, the point is, this is a real-world product for real-world people. And what I like so much about it is that it's capable of delivering a consistent listening experience across a number of different situations. That experience being a relatively easygoing and full sound. And if you like that kind of presentation, this makes for a super easy recommendation. Now, of course, Not everybody's going to like that kind of sound. If you prefer more of a balanced and lively presentation with more control in the bass, you'll probably prefer the Sony 190. And of course, if you're all about speed and power and clarity, you may prefer one of those cheap Class D amps that you can buy off Amazon for the same price or even less. There's no right or wrong here, but that leads me to the second reason why I like it, which is I just enjoy listening to it. So I'm going to leave you all with this. During the review process, I decided to have some fun by trying it out with some higher-end speakers, like my Harb FP3 ESRs, the Dynaudio Evoke 10s, and the Bacard Audio S400 Mark IIs. And even though it couldn't take those speakers to very loud volumes or show me what they were truly capable of, I had fun listening to those speakers through this receiver all the same. And that's because, in my opinion, this receiver is capable of getting the fundamentals of a good music listening experience correct. Now, does that mean it's some kind of a giant killer? No. If you spend more money, you can get better sound. Spend around $500 to $600 and you can get the Iota VX SA3, which has a similar sound, except it's better in every way, except for maybe the headphone section. But what this does reinforce is that you don't have to spend a whole lot of money in order to get a listening experience that connects you to the music in a meaningful way. And I think that's something we're celebrating. Anyway, that is my take on this receiver. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace.